45 years, 0 name changes, new offices, more staff, improved technology to better serve you. Education, services, investments. Think real estate, think Marshall Reddick. Brokerage, property management, private lending, creating financial independence through real estate since 1979.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. Super excited for this topic. It's a very hot topic, long versus short-term rentals. My name is Cameron, and I'll be presenting alongside Chris.
Hey everybody, I'm definitely excited to chat about the pros and cons of long-term versus short-term rentals. We just had another earthquake here, by the way, so hopefully you guys are near doorways if you're in Southern California to stand under if we get the big one here shortly. But we're gonna keep the show must go on kind of thing. So we're gonna keep walking through our webinar and talk to you guys about this amazing topic. I think it's definitely something that we get asked quite a lot in our day-to-day business. In fact, I fielded a call from a woman today, actually, who was considering whether or not she should turn her long-term rental into a short-term, and we discussed all those pros and cons. A lot of people get really excited for short-term rentals because they have friends and family that are operating them, and they have get told the big revenue numbers, but there's definitely some downsides that need to be taken into consideration, which Cameron is going to go in at pretty good length. And that way you guys can make an educated decision on how you want to best grow your portfolio over the next year or 10 years, right? Because this real estate game is not a short-term game at all, right? And we're looking forward to chatting with you about that. But once again, my name's Chris. I've been a real estate agent since 2013. I've been a real estate broker as well. I graduated from the University of Kansas and jumped into real estate. I've had well over 100 sales transactions, too many leasing transactions to count at this point in time. And I've flipped homes in multiple states as an acquisitions and team manager for Redfin Now and iBuyer. That was in operation for a few years. I've been involved in real estate investing. I'm currently buying a real estate investment out of state myself in Texas. And I've done 1031 exchanges, multifamily value add, and large renovation projects. So kind of done a little bit of everything, but my specialty is working with investors and advising them on how to best grow their portfolio. So we'll chat a little bit more later today on what the best way to go about beginning your real estate portfolio or expanding that. And after the topic today, which is long-term or short-term rentals. For those of you that are new to Marshall Reddick, we consider ourselves a one-stop shop for real estate investors. So that gives us 4 arms of our company. The first is the real estate brokerage. So we have agents that are located in each of our markets and our brick and mortar offices, serving our investors, helping them identify really great deals. On average, we do about 500 to 600 investment transactions a year. So very high volume, but very client focused, because every investor has got different goals, different criteria, and we locate those acquisitions for you as best as we can and walk you through all of the pros and cons and the nitty-gritty of owning investment real estate so you can make the right decision for your purchase. But as you know, like probably 10% of the battle in real estate investing, for those of you that do have properties already, you know that only 10% of those battles are won in the acquisition stage. The other 90% is what do you do after you own the real estate, right? How do you optimize the income? How do you mitigate risks? How do you enforce lease agreements? That's why you have a property manager. So we manage close to 3,000 properties across 5 different states currently, always growing. And our property managers are the hardworking folks that make sure we get quality tenants, they screen your tenants, you got the right lease agreement in place, and that we're getting the best prices on maintenance, and of course anything down to evictions. If we need to do that, we process those as well. So I'm definitely a full service on the property management side. And our third arm is our private money lending. So for those of you that are really seasoned investors, maybe you need to close on a deal in 7 days and you need funds fast. Conventional financing doesn't make much sense in that respect. 45-day closes aren't an option when you're trying to give cash to a seller right away. So you can come to us for private money loans. And we only lend money to non-owner occupied residential real estate. and we do that across many states. On the flip side of that coin, we also have an investment fund where we pool capital together with our capital partners and then lend that money out to those borrowers, and we collect an interest rate, which is then distributed back to our capital partners. Annually, it yields about 8.5% a year, which is just a great return for your money. It's very low risk. It's very distributed. It's disconnected from the stock market. And Cameron and I are sitting here with a pretty substantial amount of our own capital invested in the fund. We really believe in it as a great way to, either it's just a passive way to collect money, or if you want to keep it, in the fund and just accumulating capital, it's a great way to park cash while you figure out what your next, opportunity is. So definitely something to consider if for those of you on the call that aren't familiar with the investment fund. As I mentioned, we're in 5 different states. We have offices in all of them, brick and mortar offices in California, Texas, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, with agents, property managers in each of those markets. We hand select these markets very carefully, looking at essential components of what makes a good market for investing, right? So that's job growth, employment, landlord-friendly laws. We don't really have those in California, but we certainly have them in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, where evictions aren't measured in years or months; they're measured in days and weeks in these other states. And of course, we want business-friendly environments and diverse economies where we invest in real estate, because we don't want to have a Detroit happen, right, where just one industry fails and boom, there goes all the real estate prices. You want to have a diverse economy with good education, maybe military bases, healthcare, tech, and all of these places have a combination of that. And this, of course, none of this works without our team here. Cameron and I are in the center picture standing around somewhere, but we've got our Texas team, our Florida team, Tennessee, all the folks that make up Marshall Reddick, that are putting your money to work for you as best as we can, whether that's in the fund or in real estate, optimizing your income. We don't have just real estate agents and property managers. We have in-house analysts that are underwriting deals, that are making sure that we've got really, really, really good safe investments, whether that's for the fund or just your next purchase, and underwriting those deals. We have in-house software teams and accounting as well. So all of that is essential if you want to maximize your income. And I'm going to introduce Cameron here, who's going to walk through things. We do share a last name.
We do.
We're not related, but
No.
brothers, long lost brothers.
Long lost brothers, yeah. It is cool having the same last name and first initial. We're the CC brothers. Not actually brothers though. A little bit about me. I'm also a licensed realtor here in the Orange County area. We're at our Newport Beach office right now. I got my bachelor's in administration from Vanguard University. So grew up local. I went to school local, still local. I started in real estate accounting. It was a lot of fun to just get to learn the ins and outs of real estate. Eventually, like he said, loan underwriting. I actually was a loan underwriter here at Marshall Reddick. So for private financing, I work with a lot of borrowers. I underwrote their loans, and then I'm connected with lenders to help make sure the deals went through, especially when you had those 7-day closings. So definitely learn by fire there. It was really, really cool to be a part of it. And I've also got a chance to work in our property management department here at Marshall Reddick. So I got a chance to work on the maintenance team, overseeing large renovation projects, helping out with property management, just getting to understand really the last side of real estate. So I had the accounting, the loan underwriting for I would say borrowing, property management, and then now I'm on the brokerage, real estate, and still property management side, which is cool. I've done real estate transactions, that being sales in over 9 states at the moment. And like Chris, we don't just talk about real estate, we actually practice what we preach. I'm a real estate investor. I own real estate in Orange County, and I also invest in the mortgage fund. If you want to talk more about the fund, Chris or myself can talk more on another call, but it's a really cool product that we also agree, and we have pretty good positions in the fund ourselves. But enough about us. Let's kind of get into the topic. He just mentioned we like landlord-friendly states. Obviously, California doesn't have the most landlord-friendly laws. Some of them are, some aren't. But I wanted to quickly go over. I know not all of your properties are in California, but I wanted to just at least take a quick snapshot of California rental laws and a quick update of 2024. I would always encourage you, if you own investment properties, look up the laws for your market. Look it up as the year's coming to an end, as the year's beginning. Know and understand what you can and can't do as a landlord, what tenants can and can't do, because it will definitely affect you. And so kind of diving into that, the first one that you'll see there is as of July, which is less than a month away, basically security deposits will be capped out at a 1 month total. So it's 1 month, whatever the monthly rent is. If the monthly rent is $4,000, your security deposit cannot exceed $4,000. Before that, the max was 3 times the monthly rent. So I know for us, for the longest time, we had a 1 month rent security deposit, and then we would have an extra $400 per pet security deposit. Well, as of July, you can no longer do that. So something to note in California is you can't have a security deposit higher than that. Now, if you already have a tenant with security deposits grandfathered in, but once that tenant moves out and you're placing a new tenant, it can't be higher than 1 month. That's something to note. Something else too, if an owner wishes to move back into their rental property, they must move into the property within 90 days of the residents moving out in the home. This is basically for like, evictions. So if you want to get the tenants out and you're moving back into it, they're basically requiring a little bit more proof that you are moving into it. So I know that if there's a problematic tenant in the past, you would just move into the property and then re-rent it. Well, now they're requiring you to move in within 90 days, and then you have to wait 12 months before you can relist it again on the rental market. That's a big change. That's something to note. So if you have problematic tenants and you're thinking about it, at least in California, just note that you won't be able to relist it again until after that 12-month period. Similar is going to go for like a renovation. The laws for if you're doing a big renovation on the home, they're going to require you to have all permits and scope of work and the plan all set up prior to even asking the tenants to move out. And then you might have to pay some sort of severance to the tenants upon move out. Certain areas are different too. Santa Ana might be 3 months and it might be different other areas. If you have questions, I know we're kind of just buzzing through this. We can further discuss them, especially specific to areas or markets or cities after this call. Something else too is when you talk about squatters, there is something in place for you as an owner to protect you from squatters. So this is a positive in California, I should say. In 2024, you can basically call or contact your local law enforcement and let them know, hey, this property is going to be vacant on this date. From that date, what we used to have was within 30 days, if anybody moves in or squats, the authorities can remove them. And the problem is that after 30 days, that no longer applied. Now, if your property is coming vacant and you want to make sure you're protected from squatters or trespassers, you can have up to 12 months. It's really cool. I would just call the authorities and you can actually submit that. I say authorities, my bad, law enforcement. You could submit that online electronically. I would just kind of look it up and you'll be able to find it. If you need help, we can also direct you in the right direction, but that's another change.
Finally, a law that's in favor of a landlord in California. That's got to be a first.
That is true. The first two are not, so the next one is. Okay, now let's get into the meat and potatoes. We're going to talk about 12 major differences between long-term rentals and short-term rentals. Also, when I say long-term rentals and short-term rentals, we'll use LTR in the body of some of the text in STR. LTR is long-term, STR is short-term. After we're done going over the differences, we're going to give a very detailed breakdown of an example of a property that would actually make for a good short-term rental. But let's take a look at the data and what it would look like investment-wise if it was long versus short. So to start us off, let's talk about we've got the first four here. Number one is when you have a long-term rental, the tenants are going to be furnishing it. They're going to move in. 95% of tenants are looking for an unfurnished home that they can move into. Obviously, they're staying there for a long time, so they want it to feel like home, and they usually have their own furniture, so you don't have to worry about providing furniture or the upkeep. In a short-term rental, you're likely going to have to pay for the furniture if it's not furnished already. that could cost you 20 to 40 grand. And who knows how much the upkeep will be on that as furniture over time goes out and you have to replace it. That's just an expense that you have to factor in when you're doing a short-term rental. Something else is you don't have to pay utilities with long-term rentals. Really, the tenants are going to turn on utilities before they ever move into the property, and they're responsible for paying utilities. That includes internet and cable. With a short-term rental, you're going to be stuck with the utility bills. You're going to be paying for the water, the trash. You're going to be paying for the landscaping. If there's landscape, you're going to be paying for the electricity, the gas, the cable. And I know that there probably are ways where you're trying to bill it back or add it into the potential short-term rentals, but it's kind of hard to measure, especially when you're in those like high visited seasons, or when there's going to need there's extra heat needed in the winter, or extra AC in the summer. It's hard to regulate and bill that back. So really you're stuck with the bill when you're at a short-term rental. Number three is the basically consistency, right? There's a big difference in consistency when you have a long-term renter versus the really volatile market of a short-term rental. So when you have a long-term rental, your tenant's there for 12 to 24 months, and then they usually renew for another 12 months, and you know that they're going to pay the same amount of rent every month until their lease expires. With a short-term rental, you have no idea. You could have a good month, you could have a bad month, you could have a good year, you could have a bad year. You don't know if you're going to be able to pay your bills, if it's going to be good. It's just the volatility it's not consistent. So that's something to think about. And then you have to think of the cost of your time. If you're hiring a management company for short-term rentals, it's very expensive. If you're not, it's basically a full-time job. When you're doing a long-term rental, it's not too expensive for management, and they take care of everything. So there's almost no to little time spent at all with the long-term rental, versus you're constantly texting tenants and scheduling out your calendar for a short-term rental and constantly making sure that it's been cleaned and everything's been done correctly. You're replenishing. And that's just another part of it. And you want to add anything?
Yeah, just number one on the furniture, the documentation that's going to be required in the short-term rental to keep a potential tenant responsible for any damages. You got to have proper documentation, photographs for every single time that a tenant moves in and out. I don't think that's really very realistic, right? So you're likely not going to be able to hold any damages accountable to a tenant for furniture wear and tear. And then number four, the cost of time. I don't think the importance of this can be really understated. A lot of our clients are, doctors, lawyers, small business owners. They're going to make substantially more money investing that time into their business or their practice than they would being a property manager. Our property managers here at Marshall Reddick are well paid, but I don't think probably at the same level of a doctor or a business owner. So I think spending your time invested in your business and then having a property manager take care of your assets is a wiser decision.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Let's take a look at some data. Really, something that we'll talk about in a slide or two is just the volatility of the Airbnb market. I know we just mentioned it too, but here in 2022 to 2023, we saw a major decline in essentially Airbnb revenue. And this is provided by data from Airbnb, and we use the all room source. But essentially, they're showing that some of the biggest, hottest cities for Airbnb saw almost a 50% to 30% decrease in their revenue. And that's a big deal. You know that if you had a long-term rental in place, you don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to decrease. The rent's going to be paid the same every month until the lease expires. And you either have a new lease, you increase the rent, or you stay at the same rent. Right? That's essentially what it looks like. So something else going on to number 5 is when it comes to wear and tear on your property, there's two different ways to look at it. One is you look at it by just the tenants that are in there at a time, or you look at the amount of people that are going through a home in 1 year, right? When you have a long-term rental, maybe you're going to have 20 total different people in the home on average. You have family and friends that come over on holidays or special occasion. When you have a short-term rental, you might have 300 plus people in 1 year. A ton of people, they've never seen the house before. They don't know anything about it. They don't know how this switch works. They don't know how this works. They might break things. They might damage. It's just they're not used to the home. And that leads me to point number 6 is there's a lot more liability. They're unfamiliar with the home. They just treat it like a hotel room. They go in there. It's not their stuff. They don't own it. They don't care about it. I'm not saying they're going to trash it, but there's a possibility when you have 300 different people that some people are going to take less care of it than others would. When you have long-term renters and it's their own furniture and it's their own belongings and their own decorations, they're going to take significantly better care of it. They're going to be stuck there. They're going to see that furniture for the entire year, right? It makes a difference, the amount of people that are going into your home. Sometimes when you have a short-term rental, your neighbors might be upset with you. There might be a lot of bachelor parties. There might be a lot of noise. There might be people doing things they shouldn't do, and it just becomes a nuisance to the neighborhood. You might get your neighbors calling you. They're not going to like you. They're frustrated. That's a possibility. When it's long-term, it's really just similar to someone living there. They're going to treat it like their own home. And something else too is there's very little accountability in a short-term rental as opposed to long-term rental with the renters. When you have a long-term rental, you're going to have a lease agreement in place. This is going to be a very detailed document that says what renters can and cannot do. If they violate this lease agreement, then you can physically uphold it because you have a document that says so. But when someone just comes in for a night or two, there's no way to like hold them to this leasing contract. And there's also no deposit. Like, yes, there might be a little amount that you're going to charge them, but when you have someone moving into a $4,000 rental, they're going to pay a $4,000 security deposit that you hold until they move out. When the tenant moves out, you can deduct from that security deposit any potential damages. So they're going to do their best to keep it in as good of condition as when they found it. Do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think sometimes what people don't necessarily consider is that what makes a really good long-term rental doesn't necessarily make a very good short-term rental. Case in point, number 7, a large single-family home in a great neighborhood with beautiful views of the beach, with a pool. That's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. That might be a beautiful buy and hold rental for long-term and great appreciation. But as a short-term rental, guess who's going to be renting that? It's going to be bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, because it's got a lot of bedrooms. Whereas, maybe a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom is going to just be a couple for a short-term rental. So take that in consideration. Larger homes typically have a lot more occupancy, or not a lot more occupancy, but a lot more risk when it comes to your neighbors being upset and big parties, things like that.
Definitely. Number 9. So let's just talk about the cost of management. If your time is valuable and you don't have the time to spend on management, 2 things. One, if you have a short term, it's going to be extremely expensive. So if you're doing it yourself, you're going to have to sacrifice your time elsewhere. Or on the other hand, you'll hire someone, but it might cost 20% plus of all of the revenue that you actually bring in. And so, yes, you're making more revenue, but you're also having much higher expenses. Same with when you go over to long-term, your management fees are going to be like 7 to 9%. That's at least Marsh Reddick's management fee. 7% in California, 9% out of state, and then as the doors go up on multifamily, it's a little bit less. But essentially, taking care of your home and not having to be as active in a part of the day-to-day for 7 to 9% is significantly cheaper than 20%. Another thing is the cost of insurance, right? Insurance costs are a lot higher on short-term rentals due to the liability. We've talked about the liability, the amount of people going to your home. Insurance companies understand this too. And basically having the property as a business, they're going to have an increased insurance cost premium each year than you would just a long-term rental with a landlord policy. So that's something to note too, is that your costs are more expensive even on insurance, should you be able to get insurance. I know California, not as easy as it used to be. Another thing is income taxes are higher for active ordinary income with short-term rental versus passive income on long-term rentals. So you're going to be taxed a little bit more with the active ordinary income. And then last is you're at the mercy of local laws and regulations when you have a short-term rental. It's so important that we talk about this because it might be a booming market right now. Like, I'm going to get a short-term, this is great. And then look at Santa Ana. They just banned all short-term rentals. We're getting a lot of owners in Santa Ana transferring over management saying, hey, this was a short-term rental. It's fully furnished. I got to move all my furniture out. The city just told me like, I can't rent this out anymore. That doesn't happen with long-term rentals. You're not at the mercy of the city or the laws. San Diego basically said 1% of our houses can be short-term rentals. So now there's a limit to the amount of houses. I think it's a little different for the peninsula, or I think it's peninsula. I'll look in 1 second. I have a market statistic, so you can look at it. But essentially, you're basically subject to the regulations of the city. So that's something to keep in mind. They can change at any time.
Yeah, I think this is definitely not ordered in relation to how important these particular considerations are, these differences are. But for me, number 12, if we had to order them, might be number 1, because I am a very personally conservative investor. I want to have a pretty high degree of certainty, and I am just one voter. I can't control how everyone votes in a city. And if the city decides to overthrow short-term rentals, boom, my entire pro forma that was based upon short-term rental income just has to get thrown in the trash, and I have to pivot to a new strategy. That just blows up my whole deal. So I really think this needs to be considered. And in fact, these fines are not small, and they're actively looking for those that are violating and don't have permits and are advertising on Airbnb pretty recently. And maybe Cameron and I'll find this article, but I came across an article, I want to say it was in Denver, where the judge upheld an illegal short-term rental was hosted on Airbnb time and time again, and violated the day-by-day penalties and held him accountable for tens of thousands of dollars in penalties because he refused to take his listing off of Airbnb. So something to definitely consider.
Absolutely. And just to give you a metric here, so when we're talking about San Diego, if you look here towards the bottom right, 1% of properties in San Diego can be short-term rentals. Mission Beach, that's what I was thinking. Mission Beach is up to 30%. But the problem with that is there's a lot of short-term rentals that people are buying as investments saying, I want this to be a short-term, and they can't. You physically can't. So it could change at any time. They could drop that down to 0.5% or 0%. We don't know. And that's uncertainty that comes with owning a short-term rental, is you don't know if you're even able to have a short-term rental. Okay, let's take a look at an example. Before I do, just catch your breath real quick. Feel free. I saw a couple questions come in. Feel free to start typing your questions in. Towards the end, we'll kind of get to those questions and we'll have a second of Q&A, but feel free to type your questions now in the question chat. And now we're going to dive into an example. So earlier this year, we had an investor come to us and say, hey, I'm buying this incredible duplex in Newport Beach. It's one house away from the sand, and we think it would be a great short-term rental, but we're also thinking of the option of long-term. We're not sure which one will be more profitable. Can you run a detailed analysis for us and let us know? Provide us the market data that you have. And of course we would do that. We would do that for anyone. If you guys want us to do that for you, no problem. That's something that we enjoy doing. Data speaks for itself. So essentially this is there are going to be 2 units here, fully renovated. It's new construction. One's a 4-bed, 4-bath unit. One's a 2-bed, 2-bath unit, one house from the beach, a tourist attraction area. Really, this just, in my mind, screams Airbnb. It just screams like this would be a great Airbnb. So let's go ahead and take a look at the data. So we ran the numbers and they gave us numbers, and we used some of the comps in the area, and we determined that the 4-bed, 4-bath would rent for about $19,000 a month. And the 2-bed, 2-bath would rent for about $5,000, making the total rent for the building or the duplex about $24,000 a month. And they were looking at management. The management fees that they were seeing on a conservative low end was 20%. So 20% management fee would lead you to about $4,800 per month. Now, something really interesting you have to think about is how much time is my home actually going to be occupied? When you look at a short-term rental, it's not every single day that the home's going to be occupied. When we pull the data on AirDNA data, and you can do this for any market, I know that it might be a little different right now, but essentially they said over the past 12 months, 51% of the time, the homes in Newport Beach are occupied. That's a 51% occupancy. So when we're looking at 24,000 monthly rent, your actual monthly income is only 12,240 in rent, because 51% of the time it's occupied, 49% of the time there's nobody living there. So you're not collecting rent when there's no one living there. Meaning that the management fee is slightly lower too. Management fee at 20% is closer to 2,400. And then when you look at the next line, which is the maintenance cost. So the average maintenance cost is higher because you're going to have to restock things. You're going to have to supply furniture, fix furniture, supply amenities, and that's going to cost you about 15% of your rent. And so we factored that in here. Next is your utility expense. We're conservative here. I know some of you might think 300 is pretty cheap for all utilities, but we wanted to be conservative and say your average utilities are going to be about 300, and you're paying for those as a short-term rental owner. And we're giving them all this data saying this is what you'll be responsible for. Next is the actual fee. This is different than the management fee to post on Airbnb. It's 3% of all of your actual rent revenue. So anything that you make, you pay Airbnb 3% of that. That's going to be the 362. And everything we're looking at here is on a monthly cost. So when you're taking the 12,240 actual rent, subtracting the management fee, the average maintenance, the utility expense, and the Airbnb cost, you're looking at about 7,288.8 profit each month. Of course, we're not taking in your fixed expenses like your mortgage, taxes, and insurance, but we're just taking a look at the revenue here and your expenses. And so just to give you an idea of the data, looking at quarter 1 and 2 of this year, it was at about 51% occupancy rate. And yes, sometimes the occupancy might be higher and sometimes it might be lower. Now let's take a look at a long-term rental, the same exact property. So we obviously are going to have smaller rents. The rent for the 4.4 is about 8,500, where the 2.2 is about 5,500. Surprisingly similar, but that's just what the comps were showing in the area. So now your total rent is 14,000, right? 14,000. And so your management fee is only 8%, right? Here it's actually 7% with Marshall Reddick, but we're being conservative. So your management fee would be 1,120. Now the same when it look at occupancy, we want to look at occupancy for long-term rentals. This is pretty conservative. It's a little bit higher occupancy rate than this, but we're going to be conservative and say you have 7% of the time there's nobody living in the home. So 93% of the time there is. So of that 14,000, your actual rental is about 13,020. And when we look at occupancy rate, we're saying like the tenant's going to move out, you might have to do some quick work and then release the property. But if the tenant stays for 3 years, your overall time averages out to about 7% each year. And so your actual management fee is closer to 1,000. Now the leasing fee for a property like this, so obviously you have the 3% fee for Airbnb. The leasing fee here is going to be 50% of 1 month's rent. And the average tenant is staying about 3 years in Newport Beach for these multifamily properties. So if you average that cost out into about 3 years, it's going to cost you about $195 per month for that leasing fee. Next is the renewal fee. When you're not leasing the property, on the 2 off years that the tenant is staying an extra year, you're going to have the renewal fee where you're doing the inspection, you're increasing the rent, but essentially that's going to cost you 15%. That's Marshall Reddick's. So 15% renewal fee, which is going to be 2 of the 3 years, and we average that out. You can see the numbers here to about 117 per month. And then we average the maintenance about 8%. Once again, there's no, it's not heavy foot traffic. You don't have maintenance of restocking and you don't have the furniture, but we're still going to be conservative. So when you take the 13,020 actual rent, subtract the $1,000 management fee, 195 leasing average monthly fee, 117 renewal, and the average maintenance, you're closer to about 10,000, where we were closer to just under 8,000 on the short-term rental. And this was a it's 10,780, sorry. So this was a very helpful analysis for the owners to see, is it going to be better for me to do it long or short? And this here is data from Colliers International. This is Q1 of this year for multifamily. The occupancy rate is close to about 96.3. Once again, we used 93 to be conservative, but the average tenant is staying for a pretty good time. The bottom line is the only time it makes sense for you to own a vacation is if you own the short-term rental as a vacation home. You visit it multiple times a year and you just want to rent it out while you're not in it. That's the only time it makes sense. It doesn't make sense as an investment. Reason being is, even if you have to work 5 times as hard, but you make 5 times the amount of money, you're going to have 5 times the amount of expenses. Does that really make sense, right? You can own 3 to 4 times as many long-term rentals with the amount of time that you're going to spend with short-term rentals, and you also are going to have a higher profit margin on those properties as well. And so what we've kind of discovered is it just doesn't work as an investment when you're buying it solely for the purpose of an investment. Once again, if you want to live in it for 3 months out of the year, then I get it. That makes sense. But if you're buying it only as an investment, it just doesn't pencil out, even in the hottest market where Airbnb is just so prominent. And Chris, did you want to add anything there?
No, but I did want to do my research over here on this article that I was bringing up, and this man was fined $180,000 for illegally hosting his home on Airbnb because he didn't have the proper licensing. The judge, and this is in Las Vegas, the judge just dismissed his appeal. So he'll have basically a fine that might be the value of his house for making the mistake of illegally renting his place out. So if you're going to do Airbnb, you really need to know your laws. You really need to keep on top of how they change, and you really need to make sure if you're going to host your home that it's 100% legitimate, and that can change at any point.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So what are some qualities to look for in a property manager when you're looking at a property manager? Well, first I would start with, is there like a cancellation policy in place that I should know about? Is it like 2 or 3 years? Is it something that I'm kind of always locked in? You're going to pay a large amount, or is it standard, just a 1-year contract that renews after 12 months? That's our contract. That should be a pretty standard contract. But when you're looking at management contracts, make sure you look at the cancellation policy. Something else is how powerful is the management company's software? Are they paying for AppFolio? Are they paying for a powerful software where you can log on to a portal? You can see all of your accounting that they do for you. You can see all of your income and expenses. You can see all the documents that pertain to your property. Or is it just a text message type conversation? You want to make sure that there's good software documenting your inspections, documenting any work orders, your invoices. That's important. And then, is there a maintenance conflict of interest? When there's an in-house maintenance team with a property management company, that's a huge conflict of interest. Really what you see is you might see a company that says, hey, we'll do a super low management fee or a free leasing fee. And it just seems like a sweet deal. But they have their own in-house maintenance team, and you get 4 or 5 maintenance repairs every month. You're like, man, my house was like brand new. How am I getting so many maintenance repairs? Well, they tack on 15% of every maintenance cost, and that's how they actually profit. So when they say they only charge a 5% management fee, it really costs you almost 15% because of all the maintenance they're doing. We outsource our maintenance to a list of third-party vendors. All of them are licensed, bond insured, trusted vendors. Look for companies that do the same thing. It's important that there's no conflict of interest with maintenance. Something else too is what's important, the cost of the service or the quality of the service that you get, right? There's always someone that's going to manage your home for cheaper. There's always someone that's going to give you an oil change for cheaper. But is your car valuable? Are you going to put premium gas in a premium required car, or regular gas in a premium required car that's going to deteriorate over time, and eventually your car is going to be rendered useless? Same thing for property management. It's an important asset that you want to make sure that you're getting the quality of service that you want. Whatever that dollar amount is, of course, like cost is a part of it, but you want to get the service you want before you're just going for the cost you want. That's important. And how responsive is the company? Are they like responding to your texts and emails in the same day, or does it take them a week? Or are they not communicating when the tenant's moving out? Or do they not tell you when there's a big maintenance repair and they just do it? Responsiveness and communication is important. And then last, take a look at online reviews. Look up the company in any market that you're looking at. Look up Reddick Real Estate. Look up Reddick Real Estate Newport Beach, Reddick Real Estate San Antonio, Reddick Real Estate Florida, whatever it might be. Look up the company that you're considering and see what other people say. See what other owners are talking about. Anything to add there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm in reference to profiting off of maintenance, because Marshall Reddick does not profit off of our maintenance. It takes a lot of time. Those of you that are landlords already, you know how much time it takes to schedule a vendor, send a vendor, communicate the entrance with the tenant, make sure the job is done well, make sure that he gets paid, but you have the correct documentation, which is an estimate, an invoice, and a picture of the completed repair, right? And that the tenant's happy. All that takes a lot of work. So when a tenant calls us and says, I have a maintenance issue at my home, my hot water isn't working, we don't just hang up the phone and send out our contractor. Well, we're going to try and troubleshoot and solve that problem directly on the phone, so we can avoid A, spending your hard-earned income from that property, and B, taking the time out of crazy amounts of time and energy to get a vendor out there. So if we can solve a problem over the phone with a tenant and troubleshoot with them, that's the first step in mitigating your costs and reducing your expenses.
Yeah, absolutely. Education is so important, and tenants feel it too. Like, hey, let's fix and troubleshoot the garbage disposal. Unplug it, plug it in, press the reset button. Does it work? Awesome. Like it takes us 5 minutes to help them troubleshoot and stay on the phone with them, as opposed to taking us hours and hours and a couple days of time and work to get someone out there to get a bunch of quotes and bids, and it might cost you money when really it's just a quick little fix, right? So that's something to note too. That's a great point, Chris. So let's talk about Marshall Reddick's management philosophy. Well, we believe that the property manager should only make money when the landlord makes money, and never make money when the landlord loses money. Well, what we mean by that is, one, we don't charge when the property is vacant. So we only charge our management fee while there is a tenant in place. And number two is, we don't profit on maintenance. And so we don't profit when you're losing money by spending money on maintenance. Marshall Reddick's not making money. We just charge a percentage of the monthly rent collected. That's so important. So when you collect rent, we collect our management fee. You make money, we make money. When you spend money on maintenance, you lose money, we don't make money. That's a very important philosophy. Number two is trust. So we like to develop strong relationships by valuing trust and building it with transparency. You can see any maintenance request that comes in. You can see photos of the work before it's done, photos of the work after it's done. You're going to get invoices, right? You're going to see everything that goes on with your property. You can call us, we can give you an update. We're going to do inspections once a year. You know our system, our processes, our team. It's important that you value and trust us as much as we trust you. And then last but not least is, we look at your property as an investment vehicle. It's got to perform as one as well. So we want to make sure you're at the highest dollar amount possible, and we don't let emotions get in the way of your investment. So when it comes time for a lease renewal, a lot of times when you're self-managing your property, you might feel bad because you've built a relationship with these tenants. You called them on Christmas, you gave them a gift, they talk to you, you know their kids, they know your family. And so when you're asking them for, hey, you got to pay $200 more in rent, they're really angry and upset with you, and you feel bad, so you don't increase the rent. Where they're totally fine to pay it, but there's just an emotional connection. For us, it's just business. Hey, this is what the market's doing. We're going to educate you on it. We want you to stay, but this is what the increased rent is. Here's the data. They're like, wow, nobody's actually given me market data before. You guys taught me how to look at the market. You taught me that if I were to move out of the house and move down the street, it's going to be a lot of work, and I'm going to be paying more than what I'm paying now. I like Marshall Reddick. I like staying here. I don't want to move. I'll pay the increased rent. But like I said, it's a business running a business. That's important to know. And then let's talk about the types of properties that we manage. So we're pretty much anything residential. We manage single families, duplexes. A lot of our inventory are single families. And then as you go into the new construction properties, we have a lot of duplexes in Texas, condos, townhomes, multifamilies, a lot of multifamilies in California. We manage apartment buildings in California as well. And all of these, we take them occupied or unoccupied. If they're occupied, we take over management with documentation, like lease agreements. We want to see ledgers. We want to see maintenance that's been done on the property. That's super important for us to notate.
Oh, so what's next here? That's a slide that I'm on here. So Well, I'll tell you what's next. My name's Chris again. I'm an advisor with Marshall Reddick. My job is really to understand where you're at right now with your financial goals and where you want to end up. And real estate's a long-term game plan, right? So we look at this in 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20-year timeline horizons and figure out when are you going to retire, right? And what do you want to focus on? I think it's really, really important for you guys to understand why real estate, why invest in real estate, why not just keep investing in the S&P 500, or stocks or bonds or whatever else you got going on, crypto, I hope not, but depending on where you're at in your investing strategy, we're going to tailor that plan to get you where you need to be. And for some folks, if they're 60 years old, maybe they're looking for cash flowing assets because they're going to be retiring soon. But maybe if you're Cameron's age, you're looking for, rapidly building your wealth. So maybe you're looking for low money down solutions, more creative financing solutions. You want to be really diversified in multifamily. So wherever you're at, it's my job to explore that and meet you where you're at and get you where you want to go. So with those questions that I'm going to ask you, like when are you looking to retire, how much experience do you have, what's your risk tolerance, and how much can you afford? We're going to go over that on a consultation call. All of my consultation calls are 100% free, and we'll take it from the next steps from there. One thing that's absolutely critical when you're looking at investing in real estate is what property class you want to invest in. We define property classes all the way from luxury down to D class, and the way that that's defined is by taking the metropolitan statistical price for median or the median single family home price for whatever city you're investing in, and then looking at where does that fall on this scale. So right here, we're in Orange County. The average single family home is about $1 million right now. Sounds kind of crazy, but that's exactly what it is. 100% of that median single family home price in Orange County would be $1 million. That's going to fall right on the A and B class border there. So if you're looking at the slide, you'll see 100% is right between A and B. It's going to be like a nice, good quality school district, low crime. The higher you go in relation to the price, you're going to get into the luxury class. So like a $2 million property on the beach, that's going to be more luxury. But if you divided that $1 million price point in half, 50%, think of a $500,000 home here in Orange County. What kind of location is that? Is it the best school system? Probably not. Is it going to attract low income tenants? More than likely. And your property class really does determine what type of tenant you're going to attract. So the way that I like to say it is A class is for appreciation, B class has a bit of both, C class has some cash flow. D class, don't do it. So that's the D for D class, just don't. That's going to be more of like your Section 8 low income housing. But when we're looking at different property examples, we kind of fit them in the property classification, and hopefully it's going to line up exactly with what your criteria is. This is a little bit more of a snippet. That last slide is a snippet of our property class ebook, which goes into really great detail. It's around 22 pages long, I believe, 24 pages. And it's an amazing resource as you're trying to think about how you want to invest, where you want to invest, and those questions of why you want to invest. If anyone's interested in the ebook, we'll be happy to send it out to you. And as we mentioned, these property classes are going to really define what kind of tenant you're going to bring in. The things that matter most, one is that price point or that cost per square foot, the school district, and the crime rate. The things that don't matter really is like the things that you can change, which is the property condition, right? You can always improve the property condition. And as we know, like a beater upper in Santa Monica or a beater upper in Newport Beach is going to attract a different quality tenant than a brand new construction in Santa Ana, right? So the price point might not be that much different. So maintenance and vacancy also is going to have a big determination based off of the property class. The better the property class, so A and maybe B class, are going to have a lot lower maintenance and vacancy over time than a C class would. Why? Well, tenants that are in that white collar professional, think like doctors or lawyers or business owners that might be A class. They've probably been homeowners before, or they have aspirations to be homeowners. They're probably going to treat that home a little bit better, and they're going to want to stay in there a little bit longer. as they build up their wealth for a down payment for a primary residence of their own, right? So the vacancy is going to be lower because they're staying in there for longer periods. Whereas C-class, so think apartment buildings where the maybe average bedroom size is smaller, there's not a yard, and they've got shared garages, things like that. Maybe it's a 2-bedroom. Well, they're going to be moving out quicker than you can blink, right? Maybe you've got turnover costs that are really high because you got tenants moving in and moving out every year or two, versus a single family home where they're staying there for 3 to 5 years and taking great care of the property. This is just another example of it. And like I said, we've got an ebook that you guys can download. We'll be happy to send that over to you.
I saw Chris in the comments is just asking for that ebook. And this year, when I mentioned look people up online, look up Marsh Reddick online. This is a snapshot of some of our pages, but feel free to look us up, look anyone up in the markets you're interested in, see what other people say about them. How many reviews do they have? Do they have like 3 reviews and they're at like 3 stars? Well, that tells me they probably haven't been around that long, or they're not doing too much volume. They're not doing too well. That's important to see.
Never trust a property manager that has all 100 5-star reviews, because tenants do sometimes complain, and it's okay to have a negative review from a tenant. So our average star rating is right around 4 stars, 4.5 stars.
Absolutely. Yep. And then anything we're doing here, any of our education, you can find on our website. And then really schedule a consultation. Call Chris, call myself. We would love to talk to you. There's a couple questions we're going to go over. Feel free to type more questions in the chat as we go too. A question we see here is, what are your thoughts on midterm rentals? What are your thoughts on midterm rentals, Chris?
Thoughts on midterm rentals. I think they can have a high income, but you're kind of limited to where you're going to buy. So most people are focusing on buying midterm rentals near hospitals or near universities, where people are going to have like maybe transitory employment or a lot of turnover in employment, where they're jumping from job to job, right? So traveling nurses is a good example that people try and attract for midterm rentals. But now you're basically just buying an asset next to a hospital. I mean, it's kind of limited, I guess, in where you can buy and what you're going to buy. You also run that risk of higher vacancy, and I just don't know how long that strategy, it's kind of the hot new topic. I just don't know how long that strategy is going to be viable, right? I think people always need long-term housing. If there's a small shift, maybe midterm just doesn't work out so much.
And something else to note too, why not cast the biggest net, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking at a long-term rental, that's 95% of renters. 95% of renters are looking for an unfurnished home that has a refrigerator, I should add. A lot of renters are looking for a house with a fridge, but they're going to live in it for 12 months plus, right? 12-month lease. That's like 95% of the renter pool. So when you're looking at out of 100 people, 95% of those people, or 95 of those people, will go to rent your home. When you're going towards that like midterm rental range, it's a very finite amount of people. Like we said, like business professionals, maybe on like business leave, or maybe nursing, whatever that might be. But you're targeting such a niche that you're not going to be able to raise the rent. It might take longer to rent out. It's just not the top of the market. And so you're targeting a small audience. It's just harder to keep high, you're going to have higher vacancy, right? And probably lower rental amount. That's something to note too. Why not cast the biggest net? Another question we have is, do we offer vacant property services like overseeing properties in construction, or vacant property checks that are waiting to be rented? Essentially, yes. Short answer is yes. Long answer would be we'd have to talk more about what that means. But when properties are vacant, they might need work, right? A tenant just moved out, owner might have just moved out, they want to do some renovation work. Well, Marsh Reddick can obviously oversee those renovations. We'll get you multiple bids from some of our vendors or contractors. We're still going to do an inspection regardless, and that's just when the home's vacant. We want to get in there. We want to look at the home. We want to do an inspection. We don't like manage vacant homes. I know we've got a question before, like, hey, this is like my vacation home. I go there twice a year. Can you manage it for us? Like, I mean, why are you paying a management fee? Like, there's no rental income. There's no fee to be collected. There's no management for a vacant home, right? But when the home's vacant and it's going to be leased out, absolutely. That's really where we get started. And then I saw another question here. Want to get this one, Chris?
Yeah, let's just say. Oh yeah, what's your take on the Texas market right now, looking to cross-border invest in Houston as a Canadian? Well, we do have a Houston office. We love the Texas market. It offers all of those wonderful benefits like being landlord friendly, having diverse economies. It's got a growing population. And of course, there's a lot of availability for new construction, which is drawing families because the median single family home price, as we talked about in California, is $1 million. But if you go down to Texas, it's around $300,000, depending on the market that you're in. There's a lot of runway for appreciation. That's why we like it a lot. One other reason that I love to bring up to my clients about Texas, especially San Antonio, which is military town USA, is there's 5 military bases there. And if you look at the depreciation and appreciation cycles over like a 40-year trend line, which is easily accessible data that we have on our website, if you look at California kind of goes up and down pretty drastically over time. However, if you look at Texas and you look at San Antonio, it's just extremely consistent in terms of growth. And even during the 2008 market crash, I should say, well, not even a correction, it was definitely a crash. Prices didn't go down too much in San Antonio. They went down maybe like -0.5%, -1% during those time frames. So I really love Texas, and I think if you're considering that as an option, there's a ton of opportunity out there, and you should connect with Cameron and I to discuss further.
Absolutely. And I just want to piggyback off of what Chris said. So we're just looking at San Antonio data, right? You asking, is it better investor friendly area than Houston? Well, we'll just show you data. Once again, we're talking about data. So when you're looking at that market crash here in that 2008, everybody knows the time. What happened in Texas? Well, you can just take a look at what the market did, right? The lowest we saw it go down was about 2.29%. And since 1989, all the way up until 2003, the average appreciation is about 5.19%. So when you're taking a look at ups and downs in the market, and there's a small tick down in 23 as we were in a small recession there, but the average is what we're looking at. We don't just do an investment for the last 5 years. If we did the last 5 years, it would be very high. We look at it over 40 years and we average that out and say that's what you can expect to get for the next 40 years. That's how we look at our investments. That's how we look if it's a good market. San Antonio has military bases, they have colleges, they have medical operations, they have government jobs, right? When you have these jobs where a recession hits, they don't go with the recession. They're always going to be there. I like to call them recession-proof industries, tech industries, right? Those are really important when selecting a market. That's why Marshall Reddick put our boots in San Antonio. We said, we see this, we see the forecast, we understand this is a very powerful market for us to be in, and that's where we want to put our roots.
Yeah, in comparison to Houston, because you did ask about Houston, we do have an office there. We think there's a lot of good opportunity. Personally, this is just a personal criteria. I see, insurance is changing due to, well, whether you politics or not, believe in climate change, whatever. The insurances certainly do, and they're raising insurances or, withdrawing insurances, withdrawing from the markets in places that have high risk of climate change. So, Central Texas really is pretty insulated from those factors. They do have hot weather, but that's really kind of a benefit. That's why a lot of people move down there. So it's not prone to hurricanes or anything like that.
And then we got another question. How many Airbnb properties do you manage? None. We don't do Airbnb. They just don't work as investments. Marshall Reddick does, however, manage about 3,000 properties. And so here's a pretty cool, I would say, tool you can see on our website. So we don't just talk about managing properties, we manage properties. All of these pinpoints that you see are a property that we manage. Some communities are more dense than others. It tells you where a lot of investors like to put their dollars. You'll probably see more on the north side of San Antonio than the south side. It doesn't mean that everything's bad here, but there's probably just better investment opportunities up here in the north. That being said, the different colors represent the different property management staff members. So we have property management team that are just doing these maroon colors versus another property management team, a different property management staff for these lighter red colors, so on and so forth. And so we like to use this when we have owners say, hey, what's your knowledge on this area? Say, well, give us the property address, we'll take a look at it. It looks like we manage 2 properties on your street. This is a pretty good tool that we have. And this is kind of, it's kind of like a map of what we do, and they're all long-term rentals. Some of these might be 4-unit buildings, some might be a 30-unit apartment building. But anyways, the property is the property, and that's where the pinpoint is placed.
Any other questions that we got here?
Thanks, Chris, for saying it's a great presentation.
Thanks, Chris. We appreciate you.
I think we'll be sending Chris the ebook for sure. Chris will send you that in a follow-up. Chris will send Chris the ebook.
The Chris's unite. It's one powerful duo, that's for sure.
One other thing, let us know what you guys thought of our presentation. When you log off here, there'll be a couple questions. Give us feedback. Feedback's important. Let us know what you were hoping to learn, what you got out of this. Rate this presentation for us, and that's super helpful. If you can,
or leave a review if you liked it. If it was educational, you always can jump on Google or Yelp. We'd really appreciate that too.
Absolutely.
Hopefully this is just one, step further into your guys' real estate journey. And the next step, of course, is connecting with Cameron and I, so we can sit down for a one-on-one consultation with you guys. But we really appreciate your time tonight. Leave the feedback when you get those requests, and we'll see you on the next one.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Take care.